Chapter 1. The First Flame. In the beginning, there is no fanfare. No trumpet sounds in the distance. No sudden flash of clarity. In the beginning, there is only the whisper. Faint, subtle, fragile. A suggestion of possibility flickering in the darkness. That whisper is your soul asking the question most try to silence. What more is there for me? Not in wealth. Not in applause. But in depth. In substance. In the way a single drop carves a canyon. Slowly. Quietly. Unstoppably. Greatness was never born from comfort. Edison worked under gaslight, driven by failure more than success. Lincoln read by firelight on dirt floors, his dreams soaked in sorrow. Carnegie walked into America with nothing but the resolve to rise. And Disney? Laughed out of offices before he ever drew a mouse. What united them wasn't talent. It was the practicing mind. The mind that dares to begin when no one is watching. When the world seems indifferent. When the odds are thick and the vision is thin. But you were born in a storm. Not a storm of weather, but a storm of modern noise. Speed without direction. Comfort without meaning. Stimulation without soul. Your fire must rise through this. You must learn the art of the flame. There is a war between what is urgent and what is important. Between distraction and depth. Between fleeting satisfaction and lasting transformation. This war is not fought in the headlines or on the battlefield. It's fought in you. In the still, silent chamber of decision. And the weapon? It's not force. It's focus. To train the mind is to reclaim your power. To stand in a world that sells speed and say no. I will go deep. To live deliberately. To resist the seduction of instant results and fall in love with the process. Not the result. Not the title. Not the applause. But the work. Because somewhere along the line, we forgot. Mastery is not a moment. It's not a breakthrough. It's not even a destination. Mastery is a devotion. A discipline. A daily return to the thing that calls your name, even when no one else hears it. Michelangelo said, "I saw the angel in the marble and carved until I set him free." That is the practicing mind. The commitment to uncover what is hidden within you, relentlessly, patiently, lovingly. The mind that is not addicted to outcomes, but obsessed with becoming. To begin this transformation, we must first shatter the myth that you are broken. You are not. You are unshaped potential. Like the block of marble, your purpose is not to imitate another statue. Your purpose is to be carved, to be forged, to be practiced into form. The first flame does not roar. It shivers. It trembles. But it refuses to die. What keeps it alive? Belief. But not belief as you know it. Not the passive wishing for a better life. Belief as an active force. Belief as rebellion against doubt. Belief that dares to say, I am more than what I've been told. More than my scars. More than my limits. Every soul that ever rose, every titan, sage, architect of history, had to decide this. Will I submit to the world's expectations, or will I become the author of my own? Will I drift, or will I shape the tides? This is not positive thinking. This is fire. This is defiance. This is the mental steel that made Roosevelt rise from polio. That made Helen Keller listen with her hands. That made Mandela wait 27 years behind bars and still walk out a lion. To build that mind is not comfortable. You must let go of the comfort you've mistaken for identity. That anxious rush to check your phone, that fear of stillness, that constant craving for validation. It is not who you are. It is the mold. And the mold must be broken. So we begin with breath. With presence. With the reclaiming of your attention. So, right now. Listen. You are here. This moment is not disposable. This is the forge. The practicing mind begins with presence, because presence is power. Power to notice. To choose. To create. The future is built one moment at a time. And if you are not awake in the moment, you are asleep in your life. When you are fully present, every action becomes sacred. Washing a dish becomes discipline. Writing a sentence becomes sculpture. Listening becomes leadership. Each moment is the dojo. Each breath, a rehearsal of mastery. And still, the world will scream, faster. It will bait you with shortcuts, hacks, pills, and pleasures. But remember, the shortcut is the enemy of mastery. Because mastery is not about having. It is about being. And being cannot be rushed. You train the mind the way you forge a blade, slowly, with heat and pressure, folding failure into wisdom, again and again. Do not be afraid of repetition. Repetition is the fingerprint of the master. Every note Beethoven wrote was once just a scale. Every speech Churchill gave was once just a stutter. Every empire Ford built began with a wrench in a trembling hand. The practicing mind does not wait to be motivated. It moves. It shows up whether the soul feels thunderous or hollow. It knows that motion creates emotion. That action precedes clarity. That greatness is not found. It is forged in motion. There is no savior coming. No magic pill. No final answer. There is only you, and the flame, and the hammer in your hand. So start. Not tomorrow. Not when it feels right. The mind, like the body, becomes what it repeats. If you rehearse distraction, you will live in chaos. If you rehearse presence, you will radiate power. And when you fall, and you will fall, you do not shame the fall. You practice the rise. Because the practicing mind is not attached to perfection. It is committed to persistence. Progress is not linear. It spirals. Sometimes it doubles back. Sometimes it rests. But it always returns to the path. That path, the true path, is carved through your choices. 1,000 small choices. Each one a stroke of the sculptor's chisel. Do not wait for permission. The world will not hand you a crown. It will hand you distractions, comfort, excuses. But the kingdom belongs to the focused, the devoted, the trained. So pick up the chisel. Light the flame. The hour is late and the mountain is waiting. You are not too old. You are not too broken. You are not too far gone. The practicing mind knows the only true defeat is to stop practicing. And so we begin. Chapter 2. The Belief Behind the Eyes. There is a reason the greatest revolutions begin in silence. Because the mind is the first battlefield, and belief is the first soldier to fall or rise. Before a hand is ever raised, before a word is ever spoken, before an empire is ever built, belief must be forged in the dark. That quiet conviction behind the eyes, the one no one else can see, is the beginning of everything. And the truth most people avoid, the truth most people run from for a lifetime, is that belief is not inherited, not granted, not stumbled into. It is built, constructed, layer by layer, by what you feed your mind, by what you say to yourself in the quiet, and by how you choose to respond when the weight of life pushes down on your chest. Most people never learn to believe in themselves, not truly, because they've been conditioned since childhood to believe in outcomes, not essence. They were taught to chase approval instead of understanding their own power. To meet expectations instead of discovering potential. They were taught to get good grades, follow the rules, check the boxes, but not to build internal architecture strong enough to stand when the world inevitably crumbles. But the truth is, you were born whole. Not complete, but whole. You were not born to merely conform, consume, and compete. You were born with the raw material to shape belief through deliberate practice. And belief, once shaped, becomes the lens through which everything else is filtered. Your actions, your ambition, your boundaries, your resilience. Your entire reality bends around your dominant beliefs. If you believe the world is against you, it will be. If you believe you're not good enough, every opportunity will look like a threat. But if you believe you are here for a reason, not by chance but by calling, then every setback becomes a lesson, and every obstacle becomes fuel. This is not about arrogance. This is not about pretending you are something you're not. This is about awakening to what you could be if you stopped running from the work. The practicing mind understands that belief is not static. It is earned, trained, challenged, and rebuilt. Edison did not become the inventor of the modern world by believing he was a genius. He became a genius by failing thousands of times and choosing to believe, after every failure, that his next attempt was still worth trying. He rewired belief through action. And so can you. You cannot think your way into new belief. You must act your way there. You must earn it through the friction of movement. through putting one foot in front of the other when doubt screams louder than hope. That is the core truth of belief. It grows in motion, in the doing, not in the waiting. You will not wake up one day feeling unshakable. You will wake up tired. You will wake up discouraged. You will wake up unsure. But if you rise anyway, if you show up anyway, your belief will begin to evolve from fragile hope into grounded knowing. Clarity does not precede belief. Belief builds clarity. Every visionary, every leader, every mind that shaped the modern world began in uncertainty. Walt Disney stood on the edge of bankruptcy, betrayed by his own team, mocked for dreaming of a magical kingdom. But his belief wasn't built on what was, it was built on what could be. He didn't need others to believe in him. He believed in what he was building, even when no one else saw the blueprint. And you must learn to do the same. You must learn to build your inner scaffolding without needing external applause. Because belief that depends on others is not belief, it is dependency. And dependency is a prison. You must become the architect of your own mind. You must excavate the lies you inherited. I'm not smart enough. I'm not talented enough. I'm too late. I'm too broken. And expose them to the fire of action. Because every time you act in defiance of your fear, belief strengthens. Every time you persist through discomfort, belief hardens into resolve. Every time you speak truth in the face of silence, you reclaim your voice, and belief becomes unshakable. This is the quiet revolution. It is not broadcast. It is not flashy. It is not viral. It is slow, and sacred, and necessary. You are not just changing your habits. You are building new internal laws. And those laws will dictate your future. What does the practicing mind believe? Not in certainty, not in ease, but in growth. In the slow, imperfect, often unseen process of becoming something more. The practicing mind does not look for guarantees. It looks for patterns, principles, behaviors it can trust over time. It does not need to win today. It needs to build the habit of showing up so it can win for a lifetime. Do you understand the power in that shift? When you stop needing to feel confident in order to act, and you start acting in order to become confident, you break the cycle that traps most people forever. You shift from being a reactor to becoming a creator. And in that shift, you reclaim time, energy, and identity. You are no longer at the mercy of circumstance. You are now in a position to shape it. But shaping belief does not come through intensity, it comes through consistency. This is where most people fail. They want the lightning strike, the overnight transformation, the dramatic breakthrough. But real change comes from what you repeat, not what you occasionally do. One powerful decision will not change your life. But one powerful decision, repeated daily for a year, absolutely will. So the question is no longer, do you believe in yourself? The question is, what are you practicing that proves it? Are you feeding your mind information that uplifts and sharpens you? Are you speaking to yourself with words that build courage or drain it? Are you surrounding yourself with people who challenge you to rise or encourage you to stay asleep? Are you choosing behaviors that align with who you say you want to be, even when no one is watching? The practicing mind builds belief by making it undeniable. Not because you say it, but because you live it. Every act of discipline is a vote for your future self. Every focused hour is a message to your subconscious. This matters. I matter. The vision matters. And eventually, your subconscious starts to believe it too. That is when belief becomes instinct. Not a mantra. Not a performance. But a deep, cellular knowing. That is when your presence changes rooms. That is when your words cut through noise. That is when your life becomes an act of leadership, not imitation. The world will always try to shape you. It will project its insecurities onto you. It will try to convince you to settle, to stay small, to avoid risk. And it will reward you temporarily for obeying. But the soul does not stay silent forever. Eventually, the ache becomes unbearable. Eventually, the part of you that knows what you're capable of will start screaming. And when it does, remember this, you do not need to have all the answers. You do not need to be fearless. You only need to begin again. Each day, each hour, with resolve, with reverence, with belief in the practice of becoming. Because in the end, belief is not what we say. It is what we prove. And every moment you choose to show up, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard, is another brick laid in the foundation of a life that cannot be shaken. So keep going. This is the work. This is the way. This is the practicing mind. Chapter 3. The Power of Clarity. It is one of the most overlooked truths of all human effort, that clarity, not effort alone, is the force that defines the shape of your life. People often confuse being busy with being directed, and they suffer quietly in the chaos of constant movement without destination. They pour themselves into tasks, obligations, distractions, routines, and digital noise, mistaking the fatigue of scattered effort for the honor of hard work. But a life spent in motion is not a life lived in purpose. Motion without clarity is erosion. It wears you down, steals your years, and blinds you to your own potential. You wake up one day exhausted, and you wonder why you feel so lost when you've been working so hard. Clarity is the scalpel. It is the precise, deliberate cutting away of all that is not essential. It is the opposite of overwhelm, the antidote to confusion, the birthplace of inner peace. Without clarity, the mind becomes a playground for anxiety and fear because it doesn't know where to focus. It becomes vulnerable to distraction, vulnerable to the opinions of others, vulnerable to the gravitational pull of the world's agenda. But when you have clarity, true clarity, earned through reflection, silence, and the courage to choose, you become immovable. You stop reacting to life and start creating it. Think of Henry Ford. The man wasn't simply a mechanic. He was a visionary with a singular obsession: to make the automobile accessible to the common person. While others focused on crafting the perfect luxury vehicle, he focused on efficiency, production, systems. People ridiculed him. Experts dismissed him. But Ford had clarity, and clarity gave him something more valuable than genius. It gave him direction. He didn't have to be the smartest. He didn't have to be the fastest. He only had to be clear. And with that clarity, he changed the world. The same applies to you. You don't need to know every answer. You don't need to have everything figured out. But you do need to decide what matters. You must ask yourself, not once, but constantly, what are you actually working toward? Not what you think you should want. Not what others expect you to want. But what you want with a raw and honest heart. That question, when asked with sincerity and courage, begins to reorganize your life. It strips away the excess. It illuminates your path. It reveals what is noise and what is signal. And once you see clearly, even a little, you start to realize that most of your stress, most of your confusion, comes not from failure but from fragmentation. The scattered mind is the suffering mind. The diffused life is the wasted life. But when you reclaim your focus and align your energy with what truly matters, the weight begins to lift. Not because the world becomes easier, but because you become stronger. This is where the practicing mind becomes not just a mental habit, but a way of being. Because clarity isn't something you find once, it's something you cultivate constantly. It's a discipline, a commitment to self-inquiry, a refusal to drift. It means carving out space in your life, not just for action, but for reflection. Not just for input, but for integration. In a world addicted to speed, it is a radical act to pause, to think deeply, to get quiet enough to hear your own voice. Most people never do this. They live in the echo chamber of other people's expectations, drowning in comparison, chasing shadows. They set goals that don't belong to them, climb ladders that lean against the wrong walls, and wake up years later with success that feels like failure. And what? Because they skipped the step of clarity. Because they never learned how to sit with themselves long enough to distinguish between what they want and what the world wants from them. But not you. Not if you commit to this practice. Because clarity begins with asking better questions. Who am I becoming? What am I committed to beyond the mood of the moment? What do I value more than comfort, more than approval, more than ease? These questions, if asked sincerely, begin to untangle the web of distraction that has clouded your vision for too long. Clarity also means understanding that you cannot do everything, and you were never meant to. The belief that you must be everything to everyone, that you must master every skill, answer every email, fill every hour, that belief is poison. It robs you of your genius. Because genius does not come from doing more. It comes from doing less, with deeper focus over a longer period of time. It comes from the discipline of exclusion. From saying no to 99 things, so you can say yes with your whole soul to the one thing that matters. This isn't about minimalism. It's about alignment. When your actions align with your purpose, you feel powerfully alive. And when they don't, you feel the ache of spiritual dissonance, even if on the surface you appear successful. That ache? That's your soul trying to get your attention. That's your clarity calling you home. The practicing mind uses that ache as a compass. It does not numb it. It listens. It asks, what am I doing right now that serves no real purpose? What part of my life is out of alignment with who I claim to be? What would I drop today if I had the courage to be honest? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary. Because clarity requires courage. The courage to admit that not everything you're doing is working. The courage to disappoint others. The courage to walk away from the familiar in order to walk toward the meaningful. And let me be clear, this is not a one-time choice. This is a daily practice. Every day, the world will try to pull you back into distraction, back into doubt. And every day, you must return to your clarity like a warrior returns to his sword. It is the tool with which you cut through the noise. It is what allows you to make bold decisions, not just smart ones. It is what enables you to endure the seasons of hardship, because you know what you're suffering for. Clarity does not remove pain, but it gives pain a purpose. And purpose is what transforms struggle into growth. So if you feel lost, it's not because you are broken. It's because you are living without vision, without alignment, without a North Star. And that can change. Not through luck, not through some grand external shift, but through the steady, unglamorous work of reconnecting with what matters. Through practicing presence, practicing reflection, practicing choice. Because in the end, clarity is not a destination. It is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. And when it is strong, your life begins to change. Not because the world around you has shifted, but because your relationship to it has. You no longer waste your energy on what doesn't matter. You no longer follow paths that aren't yours. You no longer seek validation from people who don't even understand your vision. You become clear. And the clear mind, aligned with purpose, focused on growth, immune to distraction, committed to depth, that mind becomes unstoppable. So ask yourself now, without apology, without fear, what do you truly want? What are you willing to let go of in order to get it? And are you ready, finally ready, to practice the clarity that will bring your life into focus? Because clarity, once awakened, will not let you go back to sleep. Chapter 4. Vision is a weapon. There is a point in every journey where momentum is no longer enough. Where discipline begins to feel dry. Where repetition turns to routine, and even progress seems to lose its flavor. This is the point where most people quit, not because they lack strength, but because they lose sight of where they're going. And this is where vision steps in, not as a luxury, but as a necessity. Vision is not a dream or a fantasy. It is a weapon, forged in the imagination and sharpened through belief. It is the internal image that guides the external world. Without it, you drift. With it, you dominate. It is staggering how many people live their entire lives without ever forming a vision that belongs to them. They inherit one from the world. They download it from television, social media, school systems, family pressures. They mistake borrowed ambition for personal calling, and so they chase metrics instead of meaning. And they wonder why their victories feel empty. Why their lives feel crowded but shallow. It is because the soul cannot be nourished by goals that are not rooted in its own soil. To build a practicing mind is to reclaim your right to vision. To close your eyes, block out the noise, and ask yourself, not once, but until the answer becomes undeniable, what future would electrify your blood if it were real? What kind of life would make suffering worth it? Because the truth is, if your vision is not strong enough to make you weep with gratitude just thinking about it, you haven't gone deep enough. You haven't yet touched the fire. The mind will resist this work. It will offer comfort instead. It will try to distract you with urgency, obligations, logic. But vision isn't logical. It's emotional. It's spiritual. It taps into a place beyond the intellect. It pulls you toward a destiny you cannot fully explain, but you know is real. And when that kind of vision takes hold of a person, everything changes. They stop waiting for permission. They stop apologizing for their intensity. They stop playing by rules written by people they no longer wish to become. And they start moving, not with frantic energy, but with precise conviction. Every great builder had a vision long before they had the tools. Andrew Carnegie saw steel cities before he ever forged a beam. Nikola Tesla envisioned wireless communication when others still rode horses. Martin Luther King Jr. held a vision so clear and so powerful that it outlived his own heartbeat. And that's the power of vision. It outlasts circumstance. It transcends temporary failure. It becomes the anchor in the storm. The practicing mind learns to hold vision with patience, not desperation. Because vision isn't about rushing, it's about returning. Returning to what matters. Returning to the mission. Returning to the image in your mind that reminds you why the struggle is sacred. Because if you forget why you started, you will not have the strength to finish. But vision is not just about where you're going. It's about who you must become to get there. That's the deeper truth. Vision is less about the destination and more about transformation. Because the person you are today cannot hold the future you want. Not yet. You must grow into it. You must expand your emotional capacity. Refine your skills. Clarify your values. You must become someone who can carry the weight of your own calling. Vision is the blueprint, but character is the structure. If your character is weak, your vision will collapse under pressure. So you must build them both in parallel. This is why the practicing mind doesn't just fantasize, it engineers. It maps. It works backward. It reverse engineers the future into present actions. Because a vision without a plan is a delusion. But a vision with aligned habits is a revolution. What does this mean practically? It means that you do not wait to feel inspired. You do not wait to feel ready. You do not wait until you are confident. You begin to build a life that aligns with your vision today, in small, deliberate actions. You begin to edit your environment. You begin to speak the language of the person you are becoming. You begin to make decisions that stretch your capacity even when no one notices. Especially when no one notices. Because vision is not about being seen. It's about seeing. You must see further than others. Deeper than others. You must be willing to hold the image even when reality contradicts it. This is the hardest part. When nothing around you reflects what you believe is possible, and yet you hold the vision anyway, not as wishful thinking, but as a quiet, unshakable certainty. That is not delusion. That is leadership. That is vision in its purest form, faith married to discipline. And yes, people will misunderstand you. They will label your focus as obsession. They will call your determination too much. They will try to pull you back into the realm of the ordinary because your vision confronts their comfort. But remember, they are not required to understand. They are not required to see what you see. That responsibility belongs to you alone. And if you do not protect your vision, no one else will. The practicing mind becomes ruthless in this regard. It guards the vision like a fire in winter. It surrounds itself with people who challenge it, not shrink it. It reads, writes, meditates, reflects, and strategizes, not because it is bored, but because it is building something far bigger than convenience. It is constructing a legacy. A vision-driven life is not about ego. It is about contribution. It is about asking not only what do I want, but what must I give? What must I solve? What must I stand for? Because a true vision does not serve just the self. It serves the world. It adds light. It adds clarity. It adds value. And that is why it is worth fighting for. So if you are still waiting for the right time, stop. There is no perfect moment. There is only the present. And the present demands clarity, courage, and vision. Start now. Begin crafting that internal picture of the life you are committed to building. Describe it in vivid detail. Feel it. Taste it. Write it. Speak it aloud. Let it obsess you. Let it guide you. Let it challenge you to rise into the kind of person who can actually bring it to life. Because the truth is simple and unforgiving. If you don't build your vision, someone will hire you to build theirs. and their vision will never fit your soul. This is your time. Not to fantasize. Not to dabble. But to decide. To declare. To become. Let the vision take root. Let it disturb your complacency. Let it stretch your imagination. Because once you truly see what you're capable of, you can never go back to who you were pretending to be. Chapter 5. Purpose is the anchor. There is a moment, inevitable for anyone who walks the path of growth, when the external world begins to demand more than you expected to give. More time. More effort. More sacrifice. And the motivation that once pushed you forward begins to flicker. What once felt inspiring now feels exhausting. You question everything. Your pace slows, your energy wanes, and the inner voice that once cheered for you starts to whisper doubts. That moment, right there, is where most people fold, not because they lack the capacity, but because they never built a foundation deep enough to withstand the weight of the journey. That foundation is purpose. Purpose is the anchor in the storm. It is the invisible force that holds you upright when every external reward disappears. It is the meaning beneath the motion, the reason beyond the results, the fuel that doesn't burn out because it's not made of shallow goals. It's forged in truth. You cannot borrow purpose. You cannot fake it. You cannot download it from a guru or manufacture it through shallow affirmation. Purpose is discovered, not in a single moment of enlightenment, but in the quiet, repeated decisions of alignment. It is unearthed, not declared. It reveals itself slowly as you strip away the layers of who you think you're supposed to be and begin to build a life around who you actually are. And that discovery process requires brutal honesty, because most people live on the surface of themselves. They don't know what truly moves them, so they chase what moves others. They copy success because it's easier than confronting the silence within. But the practicing mind refuses to live in imitation. It demands depth. It demands that you ask yourself, relentlessly, why does this matter to me? Why am I here? Why am I doing this? Not in a vague, philosophical sense, but in the context of your actual life, your actual decisions, your actual time. You were not put here to perform roles that numb you. You were not created to obey a life script written by someone else. You were born with the capacity to feel deeply, to contribute meaningfully, to build something that echoes beyond you. But if you do not connect your actions to your purpose, no amount of discipline will sustain you. You will burn out. You will check boxes. You will go through the motions. You might even succeed in the eyes of others. But inside, you'll be dying from the weight of a life lived without meaning. Purpose does not always roar. It is not always grand or public or dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet, private, deeply personal. Sometimes it's the decision to break a generational cycle. Sometimes it's the commitment to raise children who feel seen. Sometimes it's the refusal to let your creativity rot inside you. It doesn't matter how it looks from the outside. What matters is that you know beyond the noise, this matters to me. Because when you know that, you become unshakable. Abraham Lincoln knew it when he wrote by candlelight while the country tore itself apart. His purpose wasn't to be liked. It was to hold a nation together with trembling hands and unbreakable resolve. His words were not always elegant. His path was not always clear. But he stayed the course, because he knew what he stood for. He knew what would be lost if he didn't act. That is what purpose gives you. A spine made of steel when your body is tired and your heart is heavy. And it does more than that. Purpose organizes chaos. It filters your decisions. It gives you a way to say no to everything that is not aligned. Because the truth is, without purpose, everything looks important. Every demand feels urgent. Every opportunity feels necessary. But with purpose, you gain clarity. You begin to live with a yes that has weight. You start investing your energy like it matters, because it does. And in that shift, you stop wasting time. You stop chasing every shiny distraction. You stop living like your life is disposable. Purpose doesn't make the work easier, but it makes it bearable. It makes it honorable. It turns suffering into sacrifice and struggle into service. And that's the shift most people never make. They run from pain instead of asking what it's trying to build. The practicing mind doesn't run. It listens. It leans in. It uses pain as a compass. Not in a masochistic way, but in the way a sculptor uses pressure to reveal form. Because the right kind of struggle, connected to a deeper purpose, is not a curse, it is a calling. And here's the truth no one wants to say: you don't find your purpose by thinking about it. You find it by living. You find it by doing the work. By engaging fully. By failing, learning, refining, and returning. You find it by paying attention, deep attention, to the moments that make you come alive, the problems you can't stop thinking about, the injustices you can't ignore. Purpose reveals itself to those who have the courage to look beyond themselves but still include themselves. Who dare to care deeply even in a world that tells them to be numb. So ask yourself, not abstractly, but urgently, what do I stand for? What breaks my heart that I can help heal? What sets my soul on fire that I've been told is impractical? What would I still be doing if the applause disappeared, if the money dried up, if the outcome was uncertain? Because those are the clues. That's where the thread begins. You follow that thread not to escape life, but to become fully alive in it. And once you do, you begin to practice your life with intention. You stop chasing energy and start generating it. You stop hoping for meaning and start creating it. You stop being a spectator and start becoming a steward of something larger than comfort. Purpose doesn't promise ease, but it does promise depth. And in a world as shallow and overstimulated as ours, depth is freedom. Depth is power. Depth is rare. So if you've lost motivation, if your goals feel hollow, if your schedule feels crowded but your spirit feels empty, don't double down on hustle. So, get still. Get honest. Find your why, and burn everything else down. Because when you anchor your life in purpose, you no longer need to be pushed. You are pulled. And nothing, not fear, not fatigue, not failure, can stop a soul on fire. Chapter 6. Discipline is freedom. Discipline is a word that has been misunderstood, distorted, and rejected by a society that worships convenience. For many, it conjures images of rigidity, coldness, suffering for the sake of suffering. But in truth, discipline is not punishment, it is liberation. It is the daily proof that you are not a prisoner of your impulses. It is the evidence that you have chosen to live by design, not default. Discipline, real discipline, is not about controlling your life into submission. It is about creating the internal conditions that allow you to be free. In a world addicted to instant gratification, discipline is an act of rebellion. Because everything around you is engineered to pull your attention outward. Notifications, advertisements, endless scrolling, opinion after opinion, all designed to hijack your focus and erode your sovereignty. But discipline is the act of pulling your power back. Of saying, I will not be moved by every fleeting emotion. I will not chase every distraction. I will choose what matters, even when it's hard. That's not restriction. That's self-respect. There is a quiet strength in those who build discipline into their daily lives. It is not loud. It doesn't post itself on social media. It doesn't need to be validated. It shows up before the sun rises, when no one is watching. It chooses the harder path not because it enjoys suffering, but because it understands the cost of undisciplined living. That cost is always hidden at first. Missed opportunities, broken promises to yourself, the slow decay of integrity. But over time, the absence of discipline creates a life filled with regret disguised as comfort. You don't need more motivation. You need structure. You need a rhythm to return to when your energy fades. You need rituals that protect your time, your attention, and your identity from the erosion of chaos. Because motivation is fleeting, it burns bright and then it's gone. But discipline is the fire that stays lit when the mood is gone. It's what makes you do the work after the applause has faded. It's what separates those who dabble from those who lead. And yes, discipline is demanding. It asks you to show up when it's easier to hide. To speak truth when silence would keep the peace. To keep your word, not just to others, but to yourself, especially to yourself. Because that's where real confidence comes from. Not from achievements, not from talent, but from the quiet knowledge that you do what you say. That you trust yourself. And self-trust is not built in grand declarations. It's built in the repetition of integrity. Every time you follow through on what you said you would do, You teach your nervous system that you are safe in your own hands. That's the core of discipline, not force, but safety. Not perfection, but alignment. It's not about being flawless. It's about being faithful. Faithful to the path. Faithful to the work. Faithful to the version of yourself that you are becoming, even when the current version wants to escape. And yes, you will want to escape. Your lower self will bargain, rationalize, delay, seduce. It will say things like, just this once, and you've earned a break, and tomorrow will be better. But discipline responds with clarity. This is who I am now. This is the life I'm building. This is the standard I hold, not because I have to, but because I choose to. That choice is what makes it powerful. Discipline is not imposed, it is claimed. It is not a cage, it is a container. And within that container, your genius can flourish. Because contrary to what the world tells you, freedom is not the absence of structure. Freedom is found within structure. A blank page is not freedom, it's paralysis. But a writer who commits to a daily writing practice eventually finds their voice. A musician who shows up to rehearse every single day, even when uninspired, eventually finds their rhythm. An athlete who trains when no one is watching becomes unshakable under pressure. These are not accidents. These are the dividends of discipline. And here's the beautiful paradox. The more discipline you build, the less energy you waste. Decisions become easier. Resistance becomes weaker. Doubt becomes quieter. Because you no longer negotiate with yourself. You no longer ask, should I do the thing? You already decided. Now you just do it. And in that simplicity, you create space for creativity, for presence, for flow. Think of Thomas Edison, working relentlessly, experiment after experiment, failure after failure, in search of a viable light bulb. It wasn't genius alone that carried him through 10,000 unsuccessful attempts. It was discipline. The same discipline that saw failure not as a signal to stop, but as a signpost to refine. His breakthroughs came not from a lightning bolt of inspiration, but from the slow, grinding, patient process of showing up again and again with full attention. That's what discipline does. It creates space for breakthroughs to happen. Not because you force them, but because you create the conditions where they can appear. And yet, we've been conditioned to wait for the mood. To wait for the right feeling, the right time, the right external condition. But the practicing mind knows, feelings are not facts. Moods are not mandates. The right time is rarely the convenient time. So you act anyway. You write the page when it's hard. You run the mile when you're tired. You keep the promise when no one would blame you for breaking it. And through these small, daily acts, you stop living by impulse and start living by intention. This is not about being rigid. It's about being reliable. Reliable to your vision. Reliable to your future self. Because if you are only loyal to your emotions, you will betray your potential every time. But when you are loyal to your discipline, you become capable of extraordinary things. Not because you are extraordinary, but because you have trained yourself to act consistently, in alignment with your highest values, regardless of how you feel. And in that consistency, you build something most people never touch, momentum. Not the frantic, unsustainable kind that burns out, but the steady, deliberate kind that compounds. That builds muscle, builds mastery, builds a reputation with yourself that cannot be bought or faked. Momentum turns into identity. And identity, once reinforced by discipline, becomes destiny. So if you are tired of starting over, tired of quitting halfway, tired of letting your dreams rot in the soil of good intentions, build discipline. Not for the world. Not for the applause. But for the quiet power of knowing that your life is being shaped by choice, not chance. Because that is what freedom really is. The freedom to be who you said you would be, not once, but every day. In the dark. In the silence. In the moments that don't make it to the highlight reel. That's where the real life is built. And that's where the practicing mind thrives. Chapter 7. Action is the bridge. There comes a time when thought, no matter how powerful, becomes a prison if it is not followed by movement. The mind can dream endlessly, strategize forever, plan with brilliance, and simulate every possible outcome in sterile perfection, but nothing changes until the body moves. Nothing changes until the idea is transferred from theory to reality, from intention to execution, from internal vision to external form. This is the sacred turning point in any life of consequence, the moment when potential ceases to be hypothetical and becomes kinetic. And that crossing point is action. Action is the bridge between who you are and who you are becoming. It is the test of sincerity. It reveals what you actually believe, not what you say you value, not what you hope to accomplish, but what you're willing to do in service of those values and goals. And that is where the gap exists for most people. They confuse knowledge for change. They collect insights, books, podcasts, strategies, and methods like trophies on a shelf, but they fail to translate all that learning into motion. They are fluent in motivation but paralyzed in practice. They mistake preparation for progress and build their identity around potential, not performance. But the practicing mind understands, unexpressed potential is just silent regret waiting to mature. You must come to terms with this early. Ideas are easy. Inspiration is everywhere. But execution is rare. Most people are not suffering from a lack of dreams. They are suffering from the inability or unwillingness to move. They think too much, wait too long, overanalyze, overprepare. They fantasize about certainty, as if the perfect moment will appear, as if clarity will strike like lightning and remove all fear. It won't. Because clarity does not precede action, it follows it. You don't act because you are ready. You become ready by acting. Henry David Thoreau, sitting in a cabin beside Walden Pond, wrote, "If you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now put the foundations under them." That's the essence of action. Grounding the dream in reality. Digging your hands into the soil of daily effort. Turning the abstract into the actual. No matter how inspired the vision, no matter how vivid the dream, if you are unwilling to labor for it, ruthlessly, consistently, quietly, then you do not truly want it. You want the illusion of it. You want the emotional high of imagining it, not the sobering responsibility of building it. The practicing mind is allergic to that kind of indulgence. It respects ideas, yes. It reveres strategy, but it worships execution. Because it knows the truth most people ignore. Action is the great revealer. It teaches what theory cannot. It exposes weakness, sharpens skill, tests resilience, refines character. You cannot think your way into mastery. You must do your way into it. You must stumble, adjust, learn, improve, and repeat, again and again. Not until you get it perfect, but until the act of returning becomes who you are. This is why so many people give up early. Not because they're incapable, but because they confuse resistance for a sign that they should stop. But resistance is not the enemy. It is the confirmation that you are on the right path. Because the path of action always begins with friction. The friction of doubt. The friction of uncertainty. The friction of confronting the gap between your ideal and your current capacity. And it is in that friction that you forge growth. Not by avoiding it, but by leaning into it until it becomes familiar. Think of Walt Disney again. Not the global icon, but the man who lost everything. The man who had to borrow money to keep his first studio alive. The man who was betrayed, rejected, mocked. But he kept moving, kept sketching, kept showing up. Because he understood that no matter how strong the idea, it meant nothing without consistent, creative, committed action. He didn't wait for the market to validate him. He created a market. He acted from belief before anyone else could see what he saw. And that's the distinction. The average mind waits to act until it is validated. The practicing mind acts in order to create validation. It leads. It initiates. It builds trust with the universe through effort. That is the true power of aligned action. It is both the fulfillment of purpose and the invitation for providence. Doors open. People appear. Resources materialize. But only for those who are in motion. Because the universe respects momentum. It meets you at your level of commitment. So stop waiting for perfect conditions. They do not exist. Stop waiting to feel brave. You might never feel brave. Stop waiting for the right day, the right month, the right new year. Every day that passes is a day you could have taken one step forward. 1 page written. 1 rep completed. 1 decision made. 1 conversation had. This is the math of transformation, not in quantum leaps, but in compounding consistency. Small, deliberate actions repeated with intention and resilience until they define you. And do not confuse simplicity for weakness. The most transformative actions are rarely complicated. Drinking water, moving your body, speaking the truth, saying no to distractions, saying yes to what matters. These things are not complex, but they are profound, because when practiced daily, they change your psychology. They upgrade your standards. They shift your identity from someone who wishes to someone who does. And that is where everything changes. Because once you start acting from identity, not emotion, you become unstoppable. You no longer ask, "Do I feel like it?" You simply say, "This is what I do." And over time, the world begins to bend to that version of you. People treat you differently. Opportunities find you. Life begins to reward your discipline, not with ease, but with elevation. So let go of the myth that you must know the full path. You don't. You never will. But you know the next step. And that is enough. Take it. And then the next. And the next. And trust that in walking, the road will continue to appear. Action is not just the path, it is the mapmaker. It is how you carve reality from potential. Your dreams are not waiting on better conditions. They are waiting on a braver version of you to move. Chapter 8. Gratitude is perspective. There is a moment in every journey, especially when the path stretches long, the weight of ambition presses heavily on the shoulders, and the distance between who you are and who you are becoming feels insurmountable, when something deeper is needed. Not more energy, not more urgency, but more perspective. And in that moment, gratitude ceases to be a soft concept. It becomes a source of profound strength. It becomes a recalibration of vision, a grounding of identity, and a reminder of what remains unshakable when everything else feels uncertain. Gratitude is not a passive emotion. It is not a list you write in the morning just to feel momentarily better. Gratitude, when practiced with depth and sincerity, becomes a lens through which you see the entire architecture of your life. It does not deny hardship. It does not erase grief. It does not sugarcoat suffering. Rather, it provides you with the clarity to locate meaning within the struggle. It trains the mind to see not only what is missing, but what is present. And this shift, subtle yet monumental, can change everything. Most people never learn to cultivate gratitude because they've been taught to pursue what's next at the expense of what's now. Their entire nervous system is conditioned to chase, to compare, to hunger endlessly for more, as if fulfillment is always one achievement, one possession, one milestone away. But what they don't realize is that the constant state of not enough is not a reflection of reality, it's a reflection of a mind that has forgotten how to see. A mind that has been taught to believe that joy is conditional and that contentment is weakness. But the truth is, there is nothing more mentally elite, more emotionally resilient, or more spiritually grounded than the ability to be present and thankful in the midst of imperfection. Gratitude is not the absence of ambition. It is what anchors ambition to reality. It keeps you connected to the humanity of your path, so you don't become a machine of productivity, always pushing, always reaching, and never arriving. It allows you to recognize the small wins, the subtle changes, the invisible victories that most overlook because they don't come with applause. And over time, this habit, this disciplined practice of noticing, appreciating, and honoring the real moments, builds an internal wealth that no amount of external success can replicate. You must understand that the most powerful minds in history were not just driven, they were grounded. They had the ability to hold a grand vision for the future while being fully awake to the blessings of the present. Think of Helen Keller, blind and deaf, who said, "So much has been given to me, I have no time to ponder over that which has been denied." That is not delusion. That is mastery of perspective. That is gratitude used not as escapism, but as armor. The practicing mind does not wait for circumstances to inspire gratitude. It brings gratitude into the room like a weapon of clarity. When confusion rises, it asks, what is still true? What is still good? What do I still have that I've been taking for granted? And in answering those questions, the mind stabilizes. It regains balance. It remembers that even in moments of doubt or failure or fatigue, there is breath. There is will. There is the ability to choose the next step. Gratitude does not erase the gap between where you are and where you want to be, but it gives you the energy to walk that gap with dignity. It reminds you that you are not starting from nothing. You are standing on a foundation, however cracked, however weathered, that is still holding you up. And that foundation was built by every previous version of you that refused to quit. That got up again. That made the call. That said no to the easy way. Gratitude is how you honor that version of yourself. It is how you say, I see you. I haven't forgotten how far we've come. Without gratitude, progress becomes a treadmill. You run, you sweat, you burn yourself out, and yet, internally, you feel like you've gone nowhere. Because the finish line keeps moving, and your sense of peace is always postponed. But when you bring gratitude into your discipline, into your work, into your vision, you create a life that is not only high-performing, but soul-sustaining. You begin to experience satisfaction not as a future prize, but as a current practice. And it is a practice, make no mistake. Gratitude must be cultivated, especially in difficulty. Especially when things fall apart. Especially when you are tempted to become cynical, bitter, or numb. That's when the practice matters most. That's when you must sit down, breathe, and redirect your attention, forcefully if necessary, to the things that remain beautiful. The people who show up for you. The strength that still pulses in your chest. The lessons hidden in the rubble. Gratitude at that level is not comfort, it is spiritual warfare. Because it protects your heart from corrosion. It shields your mind from becoming toxic. It creates space for joy to exist, not as a reward, but as a companion on the journey. And this is not a soft, sentimental kind of joy. This is warrior joy. The joy that says, I am not waiting for perfection. I am not delaying my peace. I am not holding my breath until the world cooperates. This is the joy of agency, of ownership, of choosing how you see, even when you cannot choose what you face. And what you begin to realize, if you stay in this practice long enough, is that gratitude and ambition are not opposites. They are complements. Gratitude says, I have enough, and ambition says, I can be more. Gratitude grounds you, ambition lifts you. Gratitude nourishes your soul, ambition sharpens your edge. Without gratitude, ambition becomes greed. Without ambition, gratitude becomes complacency. But together, they form a complete human being, present and progressing, humble and hungry. So do not dismiss gratitude as a soft habit. Cultivate it as a powerful discipline. Let it frame your mornings. Let it close your nights. Let it interrupt your frustration and remind you of what's still working, what's still yours, what's still worthy of reverence. Because in a world that teaches you to chase endlessly, to consume thoughtlessly, to compare compulsively, gratitude is the great disruptor. It slows you down. It brings you back. It restores your center. And when you operate from that center, your work changes. Your relationships change. Your resilience deepens. You stop moving from scarcity and start building from abundance. And that shift, while invisible to the outside world, becomes the very source of your inner strength. Because at the core of the practicing mind is not just skill or discipline or vision, but reverence. For the moment, for the process, for the chance to even try. Chapter 9. Adaptability is survival. It's a truth that history writes again and again, in the lives of individuals and the rise and fall of civilizations alike. Those who cannot adapt do not last. Not in nature, not in business, not in relationships, and not in the pursuit of mastery. It is not the strongest who thrive, nor the most intelligent, but those who are most capable of change. And yet, in spite of how fundamental this truth is, most people resist change with a kind of desperation that borders on fear. They cling to old strategies, old beliefs, outdated routines, and expired identities because the known, however ineffective, still feels safer than the unknown. But the practicing mind knows that growth requires transformation, and transformation requires the ability to evolve in real time. Adaptability is not a concession. It is not weakness. It is not the act of surrendering your values or compromising your integrity. Adaptability is intelligence. It is awareness paired with agility. It is the discipline of listening to feedback, internal and external, and having the humility to respond without losing your center. It is the capacity to change form without changing purpose. And in a world that is moving faster than ever, adaptability is no longer optional. It is essential. The problem is that most people confuse consistency with rigidity. They believe being disciplined means being unyielding, that having vision means locking into a single path and never deviating. But this misunderstanding kills progress. Because discipline without adaptability becomes dogma, and vision without flexibility becomes a prison. You need both, the unshakable core of purpose and the fluidity to adjust your methods when reality demands it. Every high performer understands this. Thomas Edison didn't invent the light bulb in a straight line. He adjusted thousands of times. Steve Jobs didn't revolutionize technology by staying committed to a single product. He reinvented his approach again and again as the world shifted. Even nature, with all its raw power, bows to this truth. Trees that survive the storm are not the stiffest, but the ones that bend without breaking. That is the wisdom of adaptability, not to abandon your goals, but to recalibrate your methods with precision and courage. The practicing mind understands that life is never static. Conditions change. Circumstances shift. People evolve. What worked yesterday may not work today. And if you are more loyal to your routine than your result, more attached to your strategy than your growth, you will plateau. Or worse, you will decline while pretending you're still moving forward. Because nothing decays potential faster than stubbornness disguised as commitment. So what does adaptability require at the mental level? First, the ability to detach from ego. The ability to say, this way no longer works, without shame or guilt. To say, I need to change, without interpreting that as failure. This requires maturity. It requires the kind of self-respect that is not rooted in always being right, but in always becoming better. It means being willing to update your approach, your tools, your habits, not just when forced to, but as a proactive act of refinement. Adaptability also requires awareness, deep, honest awareness of your results. It means tracking what you do, how you do it, and what it creates. It means asking yourself regularly, is this still serving me? Is this still aligned with who I'm becoming? Or have I outgrown this? This is where most people falter. They keep solving old problems with outdated tools. They keep applying familiar solutions to unfamiliar terrain. And they tell themselves that sticking with it is discipline, when in fact it's just fear. Fear of change, fear of uncertainty, fear of admitting that it's time to evolve. But evolution is not a sign of failure, it is a sign of progress. You are supposed to outgrow your old systems. You are supposed to shed the habits that once worked but no longer serve. This is the essence of mastery, continuous adjustment. Mastery is not a fixed destination. It is a dynamic process of endless refinement. The practicing mind thrives in this space, not because it enjoys discomfort, but because it trusts that adaptation is the doorway to expansion. And you must learn to trust that too. You must build a mindset that doesn't panic when things stop working. That doesn't collapse when the unexpected interrupts your plan. You must learn to pivot, not from panic, but from principle. You must learn to respond with creativity, not complaint. The way you handle disruption is a direct reflection of your maturity. And maturity is not about having all the answers. It's about staying present and resourceful when the answers change. Adaptability also means being willing to reimagine yourself. This may be the most difficult of all. Because your identity becomes tied to the systems you use, the roles you play, the routines you trust. But at a certain point, if your identity is too rigid, it becomes a barrier to your growth. You begin to protect the image of who you think you are instead of expanding into who you could become. And so, you must learn to hold your identity loosely. To let go of being the expert. To become a student again. Again and again. This is not regression. This is evolution disguised as humility. To practice adaptability is to become comfortable in the unknown. To move with it, not against it. It is to learn to surf uncertainty rather than drown in it. This doesn't mean abandoning structure, it means evolving it. Adapting structure to fit new demands. And that requires presence. Because you cannot adapt to a moment you are not fully in. You must be awake. You must be aware. You must be willing to feel the tension of growth and respond with action, not avoidance. This is how you stay in the game long enough to win. Not by being the most rigid, but by being the most resilient. Not by forcing the world to fit your mold, but by learning how to mold your response to the world while staying loyal to your principles. It is the paradox of peak performance. You remain unbreakable by being flexible. You become unstoppable by being willing to shift your stance, change your timing, adjust your aim. Because the truth is, the plan will change. The strategy will break. The circumstances will surprise you. But if your mind is practiced in adaptation, if you've built the internal habit of evolving with clarity and calm, then nothing can truly stop you. You don't just survive. You grow stronger. You expand. You transcend. And that, ultimately, is the gift of the practicing mind. Not just focus. Not just discipline. But a living, breathing intelligence capable of meeting life as it comes, agile, aligned, and always moving forward. Chapter 10. Resilience is rebellion. At some point, if you dare to grow, if you dare to aim high, if you dare to walk the path of mastery with any degree of conviction, you will be broken. Not once. Not metaphorically. But deeply, undeniably, and often when you least expect it. You will be brought to your knees by disappointment, failure, betrayal, or the sheer weight of your own internal pressure. The plan will fall apart. The work won't pay off as quickly as you hoped. The people you counted on will walk away or let you down. And in those moments, what determines whether you endure or disappear is not talent, not intelligence, not potential, it is resilience. Resilience is not a posture you perform when life is light. It is not a slogan. It is not a trait you are born with. It is a muscle forged in the fire of repeated resistance. It is the inner architecture of those who have learned how to bend without breaking, how to pause without quitting, how to rest without surrendering the mission. Resilience is the rebellion against the narrative that says you need to be perfect, strong, or motivated all the time. Because it is not strength that keeps you standing, it is the ability to rise again and again and again. Most people misunderstand what resilience really is. They think it means being untouched by struggle, unaffected by adversity, always smiling through the storm. But real resilience is far more brutal and far more beautiful. It is what happens after the breakdown, after the silence, after the sleepless nights. It's what you build when you choose to get back up, not with naivety, but with a deeper, quieter kind of power. A power that says, I've met failure. I've walked through it. I didn't like it, but it didn't end me. And because of that, I'm stronger than before. Resilience doesn't mean you don't feel pain. It means you don't let pain make your decisions. It means you learn how to process disappointment without letting it rot into bitterness. It means you hold grief with grace, anger with awareness, exhaustion with patience. Because the resilient don't avoid emotion, they understand it. They feel it fully, but they don't let it rule their choices. They cry, but they still write the next chapter. They fall, but they never redefine themselves as someone who stays down. And that mindset, that refusal to break, must be practiced. It does not come naturally in a world that conditions you to quit at the first sign of resistance. Our culture glorifies comfort, celebrates ease, and markets convenience like a virtue. But resilience is forged in the exact opposite of all that. It is forged in doing what you don't feel like doing. It is built through choosing the harder conversation. Through choosing to show up one more day when yesterday almost broke you. Through learning to sit with pain instead of numbing it, and learning to grow through hardship instead of escaping it. There's a reason the names we remember, those who rise above history, who shape generations, are not the ones who had smooth journeys. They are the ones who were scarred by life and kept moving. Abraham Lincoln, battling depression, political loss, and personal grief, still held a nation together. Nelson Mandela, locked in a cell for nearly 3 decades, emerged not with vengeance, but with vision. These are not fairy tales. They are testimonies of resilience, not in theory, but in flesh and blood. And you must decide whether you will cultivate that same quality. Because without resilience, everything else falls apart. Purpose becomes fragile. Discipline becomes brittle. Action becomes reactive. Without resilience, your identity becomes a house of cards, impressive until touched by real pressure. But with resilience, you become unshakable, not because life is easy, but because you are no longer afraid of being broken. You have learned how to be broken and still move forward. The practicing mind prepares for adversity, not with fear, but with readiness. It doesn't wait to be tested before it trains. It builds the habits, the mindset, the routines, and the internal structure that can withstand emotional storms. It practices composure. It practices detachment. It practices the art of not making decisions from panic, but from clarity. And when the storm hits, and it always does, the practicing mind is not caught off guard. It feels the impact. It takes the hit, but it does not collapse. It regroups. It reorients. And it returns. Resilience is what allows you to be both soft and strong. To be both ambitious and grounded. To be both passionate and strategic. It teaches you that it's okay to feel lost for a while as long as you keep walking. That it's okay to slow down as long as you don't turn around. That it's okay to question everything as long as you don't quit on yourself. And most importantly, it teaches you that setbacks are not signals to shrink. They are signals to expand. To dig deeper. To build smarter. To grow stronger. Every difficulty contains within it the potential to level you up, but only if you meet it with the right response. Without resilience, pain becomes poison. But with resilience, pain becomes purpose. You don't need to be superhuman to be resilient. You don't need to be emotionless. You don't need to be endlessly positive. You only need to make a decision. No matter what happens, I will keep going. Not blindly. Not recklessly. But wisely. Intentionally. Relentlessly. Because your story is not defined by how many times you were hit. It is defined by how many times you came back. Stronger. Clearer. More focused. And more faithful to the version of you that doesn't just survive, but transcends. Chapter 11. Learning is identity. If there is one practice that must never stop, one discipline that must be woven into the very core of a life worth living, it is learning. Not just learning in the academic sense, not just absorbing information to pass exams or impress people, but the deep, continuous evolution of your own understanding. Learning, real learning, is the engine of reinvention. It is how you outgrow limitation. It is how you challenge the illusions you've been handed by the world, and how you rebuild the mental framework that determines the quality of your decisions, your confidence, your relationships, your leadership, and ultimately your life. To stop learning is to stop living. It is to choose mental stagnation. And stagnation is not peace, it is quiet decay. The truth is, most people stop learning not because they lack access, but because they lose curiosity. Somewhere along the line, they begin to associate growth with discomfort. They start to prioritize being right over being real. They fall in love with the identity they've built and fear that new knowledge will disrupt the comfort of familiarity. So they protect their old beliefs. They insulate themselves with people who echo their thinking. They avoid books that contradict their worldview. And slowly, without realizing it, they become relics, versions of themselves frozen in time. But the practicing mind does not fear disruption. It welcomes it, because it knows that the discomfort of being challenged is far better than the dull agony of becoming irrelevant. To learn continuously is to say, I am more committed to becoming better than I am to protecting who I've been. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. That is strength. Learning is not something that happens only in school. In fact, some of the most dangerous minds are those who confuse credentials with competence or degrees with depth. Learning is a posture, a lifestyle, a commitment to ask better questions, to listen more carefully, to observe more deeply. It is the humility to admit that what you know today is only a fraction of what is possible to know tomorrow, and that no matter how much you've seen, done, read, or built, there is always more to understand. This is why those who master any craft, true masters, not just performers, are always students at heart. they never lose that hunger, that drive to go deeper, that refusal to be seduced by their own accolades. Think of Leonardo da Vinci, sketching machines centuries ahead of his time, dissecting cadavers to understand the human body in obsessive detail, not because anyone told him to, but because he was consumed by curiosity. Think of Elon Musk reading rocket science textbooks in his spare time, not as a child, but as an adult CEO, because he was unwilling to let ignorance limit his vision. These are not outliers. These are people who practice learning not as a phase, but as an identity. And you must do the same. You must reclaim learning as a central pillar of who you are. You must build systems in your life that make learning inevitable. Read constantly, not just for entertainment, but for expansion. Seek out people who know more than you, not to impress them, but to be stretched by them. Challenge your assumptions. Examine your habits. Take feedback seriously, not personally, because feedback is one of the fastest ways to grow, if you're willing to listen without ego. Feedback is data. Feedback is opportunity. But most people defend their weakness instead of refining their skill. They would rather protect their pride than elevate their performance. The practicing mind flips that entirely. It says, I am not my mistakes. I am not my ignorance. I am what I choose to become. And from that perspective, everything becomes fuel. Every failure is a teacher. Every success is a lesson. Every difficult conversation, every uncomfortable truth, every confrontation with limitation, it's all part of the curriculum. Life becomes a dojo. Every day becomes a class. And you stop seeing obstacles as interruptions. You start seeing them as assignments. And here's the deeper truth. The more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. This is the great paradox. True knowledge doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you humble. It softens your judgments. It slows your assumptions. It deepens your empathy. Because you start to understand the complexity of things. You start to recognize that most people are doing the best they can with the mental software they've been handed. You start to see how many of your own beliefs are inherited, untested, outdated, and you begin to dismantle them with love, not shame. Learning also makes you adaptable. When the world changes, and it always does, you're not caught off guard. You're not frozen by fear. Because you've trained yourself to be mentally agile. You've trained your mind to move with uncertainty. That is one of the greatest advantages anyone can have in today's world. The ability to learn fast, unlearn faster, and relearn without ego. You become evolution in motion. But that's not something you do occasionally. It's something you become. And becoming that person takes structure. You must carve out time to learn, even when life is full. Especially when life is full. You must feed your mind with the same discipline you feed your body. Curate what you consume. Protect your attention. Choose your teachers wisely, not just people who sound smart, but people whose lives reflect the values you want to live. Because information is everywhere. Wisdom is rare. And your growth depends on your ability to filter the noise and stay grounded in the signal. Learning must also be active. Passive consumption is not enough. You must engage. Reflect. Apply. Ask questions. Write what you've learned. Teach others what you understand. Because teaching is the final stage of learning. When you teach, you discover the gaps in your knowledge. You refine your thinking. You sharpen your language. And you elevate the people around you. In doing so, you create a cycle of growth that sustains itself. So don't just be inspired by knowledge. Be transformed by it. Let it rewire how you think, how you speak, how you show up in the world. Let it inform your choices. Let it shape your habits. Let it interrupt your mediocrity and stretch you into brilliance. Because in the end, the people who rise are not the ones who knew it all from the start. They're the ones who never stopped learning. The ones who stayed open. The ones who remained teachable. Even when they had every reason to believe they were already good enough. Because good enough is the enemy of greatness. And learning, relentless, humble, intentional learning, is the bridge between the two. Chapter 12. Transformation is a decision. This is the moment where everything converges. Every lesson. Every practice. Every principle. This is where the road behind you meets the road ahead, and you are no longer the person who first began listening to this voice. Something in you has shifted, perhaps subtly, perhaps powerfully, but shifted nonetheless. And now, a question stands before you. Not a question of knowledge, not of theory, but of commitment. What will you do with this mind you've begun to shape? What will you build with this life you've started to reclaim? Will you drift back into the unconscious rhythm of your old self? Or will you cross the line, once and for all, into a new kind of being? Because make no mistake, transformation is not something that happens to you. It is not accidental. It is not automatic. It is a decision. A deliberate, often uncomfortable, and always courageous act of choosing a new standard for yourself, one that does not wait for motivation or approval or circumstance, but rises from within like a revolution that refuses to be silenced. And you must understand that this decision is not made once, in a dramatic moment of inspiration. It must be remade every day, in the quiet corners of your life, in the small choices, the unnoticed hours, the conversations where you speak truth instead of convenience, the mornings where you rise despite fatigue, the evenings where you reflect instead of escape. That's where the real transformation is forged, not in public, but in private. Everything in your life up to this point, your habits, your beliefs, your results, has been a reflection of your practiced mind. Not your potential, not your worth, just your practice. And that means everything can change if your practice changes. There is no destiny carved in stone, no fate stronger than your commitment to evolve. But you must let go of the old identities, the narratives that kept you small, the inner dialogue that told you you were too late, too undisciplined, too flawed to change. Those were never facts. They were just repetitions, thoughts rehearsed so often they became beliefs. And now, you have a new rehearsal to commit to, the practice of power, presence, clarity, purpose, and relentless self-mastery. This does not mean perfection. It never has. Perfection is the myth that paralyzes progress. The practicing mind knows better. It knows that mastery is messy, that the process will challenge you, stretch you, break you open, and rebuild you in the image of your own highest potential. And you must be willing to endure that discomfort, not because you love suffering, but because you love who you are becoming more than you fear what you must go through to become them. The world around you may not change instantly. It may not recognize the quiet fire you've lit within yourself. It may still pull you toward old temptations, old roles, old distractions. But your relationship to that world has changed. You are no longer a passive participant. You are a sculptor now, a builder, an architect of thought and identity. You are no longer a servant of reaction. You are a leader of response. You no longer beg the future for mercy. You meet it like a warrior who has trained for this moment. Because that is what this journey has always been. A training. Not for something outside you, but for the only thing that has ever mattered, your mind. The way you think, the way you perceive, the way you speak to yourself in silence, and the way you choose to show up when no one is watching. That is where greatness is born. Not in applause, but in attention. Not in speed, but in depth. Not in the results you chase, but in the rituals you commit to. And now, the invitation is clear. Not to change everything overnight, but to begin. To begin the next chapter not as the person you've been, but as the person you now know you can become. To move from theory into embodiment. From inspiration into execution. From potential into presence. You do not need to be fearless. You do not need to be extraordinary. You only need to be devoted to the process, to the work, to the daily return to your practice. Because what you practice, you become. And if you continue to practice discipline, presence, belief, adaptability, and deep learning, then transformation becomes inevitable. Not magical, not easy, but inevitable. Because it is the compound effect of your repeated becoming. No more waiting. No more doubting. No more delaying the life you were meant to lead. You do not need another reason. You do not need permission. You do not need guarantees. You need movement. You need practice. And you need the courage to make this moment mean something. This is not the end. This is the ignition. Now go. Build the mind. Practice the life. Become the force you were born to be. train your mind, transform your life. It begins again,